Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. My name is Crispin Manners. I'm one of the crisis experts at WorldCom, based in the UK, and I'm delighted to be one of the hosts for today's webinar on crisis communications planning for multiple international sites. I'd like to introduce you now to our primary presenter today, Tom Donohue, who I've had the pleasure of working with for almost 20 years. Tom, could you say hi and maybe a few words on your background? That'd be great.
Well, good morning from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. My name is Tom Donohue. I'm president of Donohue and Associates. We're a public relations management communications company. We specialize in international clients and crisis issues management and training. My background, my degree is in journalism. I worked as a reporter for radio, television, and newspapers here in Canada. Speechwriter for a federal cabinet minister, then with the Canadian Foreign Service dealing with international media and crises. Then Trans-Canada Pipelines for corporate. Their fun is a 36-inch gas line going up about midnight right beside a nursing home. And the last 34 years in consulting. On the crisis side, we have clients in mining, chemicals, telecommunication, energy, many of whom have multiple sites around the world. So this is not nuclear physics, but I'll turn it back to Crispin because he has some good examples. One in particular is somebody who has no business in front of a television camera. Crispin?
Thanks, Tom. As you can see from this slide, the WorldCom Partnership has the capability to prepare for, support and manage crises in pretty much any industry sector around the world, from transportation through to education, food, health, government, etc. Clearly the reason why we're running the webinar today is that, as pretty much everyone knows, is if you're faced with a crisis and you're ill prepared and you get it wrong, time really matters. The ability to respond appropriately quickly is really important. Get it wrong and it starts to cost you a lot of money, not just immediately, but potentially over a significant period. Obviously the flip side is true, that if you're well prepared and get it right, you can seriously enhance the reputation of your organization and reap the benefits. Just want to run through 3 examples really quickly. Many of you have probably heard of Airbnb, interesting organization, and they've been through a pretty steep learning curve when it comes to crisis management. A few years ago, they were on the receiving end of being ill-prepared when one of their properties was rented out and something fairly disastrous happened, to more recently where something similar happened, and they received very positive media coverage on the speed of response, the positivity of the response, and the experience they gave to their customer. So I think Airbnb's story is a good example of the fact that you're never going to be able to protect your organization from being confronted with a crisis, but what you can do is make sure that you're adequately prepared so that you handle it in the best possible way. Second example is for a fairly iconic ice cream brand in the US, based out of Texas, but with multiple retail outlets in a number of states. In Texas, Bluebell ice cream is seen as almost a friend of the family. And when they had a recent issue with their ice cream where listeria showed up, the general response of the whole community was to support the brand and be deeply sympathetic. That was until last week, when it appeared that they had been hiding the fact that they'd had these issues over a number of years, at which point the whole tone and tenor of the response from the community changed dramatically. Tom's going to cover some of the reasons why that their behavior is so inappropriate in a crisis later, which brings me to our third example, which is for a chemical company who recently had last year had a spillage, and I just wanted to run this video so you could see, as Tom says, how ill-prepared this CEO was to be the face of the brand in response. As you can see from the screen, he's taking a sip from a water bottle. That's actually really quite significant, because the crisis concerned related to a spillage of deeply toxic chemicals into the river adjacent to the factory, as a result of which hundreds of thousands of people in multiple counties were denied access to water of any type. And as you can see, he's, as you would expect, about to be confronted by the local and national media. I'll just run this video. It'll last just short of 2 minutes.
Look guys, it has been an extremely long day. I'm having a hard trouble talking at the moment. I would appreciate it if we could wrap this thing up. I will.
Well, we actually have a lot of questions, and it's been a long day for a lot of people who don't have water. So can you give us an exact timeline as to how this all happened? The DEP was saying earlier today, as early as 8:15 yesterday morning, they were getting reports, and that you all did not call it in until 12 noon. The DEP was already here at 11:15. So what's the timeline on all this?
We were aware of the leaking storage tank around 10:30. We load tank trucks of this material on a regular basis, and occasionally we've had reports of an odor previously. So we were first aware of any material being spilled at 10:30 yesterday.
Could it have been earlier than yesterday? Because we've also received reports into our newsroom that it was as early as Wednesday, possibly Tuesday. People were starting to smell this in the area.
We have no information on that.
Are there no systems in place to alert you of a leak at your facility other than a smell?
At this moment in time, I think that's all we have time for. So thanks for coming. Thanks for
We have more questions. Hey! No, we're not done.
You're not done.
We're not done. No. Anyone else have any other questions?
So I think, as you can see, a fairly interesting experience for that gentleman and his organisation. At this point, I'd like to hand over to Tom to run you through his recommended approach.
Well, first, this guy should be put away where he can't be seen or heard. Obviously, there are a lot of companies like that out there. It's a failure in leadership. When you're dealing with multiple sites internationally, it all really starts at headquarters. The headquarter culture is crucial. They've got to be aware of the different languages, cultures, political structures that their sites are working in, the economic issues at play, the history of their particular industry in the host country. Many countries, or many companies rather, fail to remember that they're living and working in somebody else's house. And those that are effective do understand that they're in somebody else's house and conduct themselves accordingly. Now, there's three basic pillars in success in dealing with crisis communications internationally. It's culture, strategy, culture, and practice. Let me start with progressive headquarters culture. First, it's teamwork. In other words, a good organization, a good company that's successful internationally is a very flat organization. It's not a dictatorship. It's not hierarchical. Everybody's working together for something. They also understand the power of communications. Too many companies are so driven by production and what the company does that they forget communications has a huge impact on their ability to operate, both positively and negatively. Now, also coming down to legal, It's critical to work with the legal department. The trouble is, lawyers want to take over and say nothing. They think the communications people want to barf their guts out and say things that shouldn't be said, and that's wrong. Not all lawyers are built that way, but many are. So I just tell lawyers that I'm working with, I'll stop giving legal advice if you stop giving communications advice. Any communication's got to be open, honest, helpful, cooperative, and available. And a half-truth is a half-lie, and you never, 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 never lie. In other words, now we're back to the corporate culture again. The best companies lead from behind. The site runs the show. In other words, if the crisis is in Burundi, New York, or London, or Tokyo, or Johannesburg, support. Too many corporate cultures, the executives want to take over. They're very, very vulnerable. They're used to being in control and giving the orders. When you've got headquarters 5, 6, 10,000 miles away, the suits get nervous. So they've got to lead from behind. In other words, support the site. Very, very important. It's a mindset, and it's a classic characteristic of good, enlightened leadership. Also, the progressive corporate culture, some of my clients are obsessed with safety, absolutely obsessed with it. Safety is our #1 priority. Yeah, right. I have land in Florida and someplace in the jungle you can buy. It's a line that many companies parrot but don't mean it. In other words, safety's got to be everything, and it has to be a living, breathing thing, not just at the site but also at headquarters. Ethical conduct, too. We won't work with clients who won't be totally transparent and honest. Ethical conduct is really it's common sense, but there's not a lot of common sense around. The best talent, it has to be the best talent in the corporate office as well. Want to get people who know what they're doing, can work as a team, have the philosophy of open, honest, helpful, and cooperative, also have an understanding of the international environment. In other words, when you're operating in Asia, you're not in New York anymore, you're not in Berlin anymore, you're not in Moscow anymore. Everyone has to be aware of the cultural differences, somebody else's house. Now, there's a lot of archaic cultures around. They keep us in business, just like the idiot who stood in front of the camera sucking on a bottle of water. I mean, and it's not nuclear physics. This is really simple stuff. The archaic corporate culture, it's dictatorship. The executives rule through fear. So you've got a very weak leadership. They're control freaks, and they think all the talent and brains resides in corporate headquarters. It's these sorts of cultures where the lawyers say nothing and we'll win in the courts, and we get our brains beaten out in the court of public opinion. My view is it's easy for the lawyers. It makes their work easier. It doesn't help the client any. There's also great fear of the media because they fear what they don't understand. And communications people spend a lot of time trying to help executives who are afraid of what they don't understand. In other words, that's where the silence comes from. There also is a lack of trust, not just within the corporate office, but lack of trust in the site to do the job. If you've got the right people in the site, no matter what country you're in, you've got a reflection of a positive corporate culture. But the archaic ones don't trust anybody, and they want to be in control and do things from 10,000 miles away. Idiotic, self-inflicted wounds. They also tend to be control freaks. The lawyers want to control, the CEO wants to control, the bean counters want to control. So it tends to be a fight for control and influence at headquarters. And what gets forgotten is the site, which is where the action is. It's delegate down, and all the brains aren't in headquarters because if they've done their hiring properly, they've got some real serious talent at the sites, and they should simply get out of the way and support them. The trouble is most archaic corporate cultures don't, and they leave a trail of destruction that in some cases can last for generations.
Before we move to the next slide, I just realise I forgot to say at the outset that we will be taking questions at the end, and on your screen that you registered through, there is a box that says "Got a question." If you want to type a question in at any time during the presentation, we'll pick them up at the end.
Now, you also need a progressive site culture. If you've got a progressive corporate culture, this should also be reflected at the site that's impacted with the fire explosion, the leak, hostage-taking, shooting, civil war. Again, it's teamwork, not dictatorship. Highly skilled operational personnel. In other words, if you've got a crisis, you don't PR your way out of it. If you're running a sloppy operation, that's an operational problem. It's not a communications problem. But you need really highly skilled people who know what they're doing. You also need strong local representation on the management group. My clients will train local people in management positions. In many cases, try and move them to the top positions so that they can be transferred to other countries. So they're able to get involved in personal and professional development so that it's not all foreigners doing the work. They also must be woven into the community they're working in, somebody else's house. They need to be known by the political people, known by the community leaders at all levels. Strong local relationships are really important, especially when something goes wrong. They also must have high standards, ethical standards, high moral standards. And also, you're going to see a lot of very low turnover. I've got a client here in Canada where the turnover is so low, people move either because they've been promoted, retired, or die. I've never seen a corporate culture like it. The vice president who runs the plant, he's in the 22nd century. Very, very rare. But there should be more of that. Now, there are also archaic site cultures, which again are a reflection of the backward corporate culture where the executives are still wearing animal skins and carrying clubs. The plant manager, the VP, is a dictator. Frequently, there are foreign managers who come in and try and run the operation the way they would in their home country. Local managers are in symbolic positions. There's a fear of headquarters. We don't want headquarters involved because they'll just mess it up. And there's an absolute paralyzing fear of the media. In some cases, honestly held because they've abused their media relations from the very beginning. In other words, really good crisis communications begins before you got a crisis, not during or after. Back to silence again, say nothing, and that silence can come from the lawyers and come from people who say, well, this will all go away tomorrow. Well, it doesn't. In some cases, it goes into the community's legend and history and is passed on from one generation to another. Exxon Valdez, ring a bell? Chernobyl, need I say more? Needless self-inflicted wounds starting with backward leadership and just simply awful operations. Now, the communication strategy it's again very simple. This is a team game. In other words, the site runs the operations. They also run communications at the site. But the philosophy is based on people first, environment second, property third, in that order. When you've got a crisis, it's all about people. Nepal is all about the people. It's not about the collapsed buildings. It's not about the weak economy. It's not about the difficulty getting aid to where it's needed. It's all about the people. Nepal environment is also involved as well. But people first, environment second, property third when it comes to industry. Also, when the eyes of the world are upon you, and this may be the only time the world actually sees an organization functioning, where it's the teamwork again. Everybody needs to work together. That also means working with local authorities, local response people. The site literally runs it and tells the corporate office what they're doing. Now, that doesn't mean the site answers every question. There's some things that belong to corporate. But back to honesty, open, honest, helpful, cooperative, and available. Real simple stuff. It's what you know when you know it. You've got to be first, you've got to be fast, and you've got to be right. In other words, speed is everything, and volume, you're not going to have a lot of volume in the early going. In the early going, you may only know there's an incident. You won't know when, you won't know where, you won't know what the impact is, how serious it is, and there's a great tendency on the part of the backward companies to hang on to stuff. We don't have enough information. There's never enough information. Even when it's over and the investigation is finished, there's never enough information. So it's this constant flow of information. The public has a right to know many things, but some things they have no right to know, and some things they have a right to know, but not right now. That must be established really before you've got the crisis. But it's all about truth. The truth is right 100% of the time. It's defensible 100% of the time. It's correct 100% of the time. I'll never understand why some of my clients have a hard time with the truth. Sometimes the truth can be awkward, messy, embarrassing, difficult. Those are emotional problems. Sometimes the truth can be very, very complex. And when you're working internationally, you have the complexity of language and culture and behavior and history. That can be complicated. But all those issues must be worked out and thought through before you've got an incident. In other words, another foundation for crisis communications is be on page one for 24 hours and get off. Get off the television, get off the radio newscasts, get off the websites, get off social media, disappear into the mists of time and history. In other words, be there, be first, be fast, and you become the most reliable source of information, because the media and the public and social media will be looking to the expert, the special, the neighbors nearby, the politician with the agenda, the regulator with a problem. They're all going to be part of the story. But if we're there first and fast and our information is right, more weight will come to what we say, and in some cases the media will just stop going to the special interest groups like Greenpeace. One crucial point that's forgotten by just about every company that I've worked with in crisis is they forget about the families of those who are impacted. They're focused on the fire, the explosion, the leak. The great attention must be paid to it. But usually, in my experience, the crisis is in very good hands operationally. Crisis response teams know what they're doing. Police know what they're doing. Paramedics know what they're doing. Hospitals know what they're doing. The crisis is usually in very good hands. Where you run into problems is in the communications, and the biggest problem you're going to have in communications is going to be the families. The families have got to be put first. They've got to get information first before the media. Every now and again I'll see a company where they're really doing it right. They keep the family separate and protected from media glare. They ask the families if they could have one person do the talking for the group, a family spokesperson, and it's based on aptitude, so that one person does the talking. The media will really want to find out what the families are doing and thinking, and they need their own spokesperson. The media glare can be awful, especially when loved ones are either missing or dead or seriously injured. The emotion level is high. The one place on any site is going to be the parking lot, where you've got the media and the families arriving together. They've got to be separated and protected from each other, because if the company is not providing information, you could have somebody going to the media and saying, they haven't told us anything, they've been lying to us, and I've seen that. And then the reputation is trashed, usually because the company and the site has no plan and they're making it up as they go. Amateur night at the zoo. Major point, get big fast. And that means at the site, but also at the corporate office. Management too often is spending a lot of time trying to conserve resources. You got something that's happening, you don't want to underestimate it. It's better to have too many people than not enough. Bring in people so that if you don't need them all, you can send them home. And that means support people as well. Who's going to order the food? Who's going to give access to the site? Who's going to do some of the basic tasks that need to be done to support management? The trouble is management gets there, and they also need to be changed out. If you're in a really fast-moving crisis situation, Your crisis management team can start getting burned out after 4 hours. They've got to be changed out. I had one client who ignored the advice, and their crisis management team was on the line, literally running the crisis for 36 hours. And after 24, they were making mistakes. But it's a mindset and a philosophy of we don't want to go overboard on this. When get big fast, too many people is the way to go. Now, structure is also important. Too many companies may be really great in operations, but you got crisis communications. They have no structure. They make it up as they go. The first thing is to try in developing crisis communications plans. You've got to look at the plans in place if there are any, and that means both the corporate headquarters and the site. The crisis communication plan should be built on the emergency response plan or operations. In other words, what kind of action or what kind of crises could occur? What are we going to do operationally? One of the problems is a lot of crisis communications plans are built into physically the emergency response plan, which can be 200, 300, 400, 500 pages, and communications is scattered throughout. It's got to be broken out separately as a separate document. Also, the framework with the corporate office and the site must be similar. You've got to be using the same vocabulary, for example, so you're able to talk to each other, especially when there's different languages involved. So the corporate office can have its own structure, but then have it compatible with each site, and each site must be customized to meet the needs of the local site. One size doesn't fit all, period, end of story. But there should be a basic common framework around which the sites can customize locally. Local language is really crucial. If the vice president or general manager doesn't speak the local language and happens to be on an airplane when something happens, you've got to be talking the same language. And that means you need somebody at corporate office who can speak Russian, who can speak Portuguese, who can speak Spanish, who can speak Chinese, so that they're able to communicate with the site. Because in some cases, the site may not have somebody available during a crisis who speaks the language of the corporate office. It tends to be forgotten. You also need some depth in that. You need primary, first alternate, and second alternate. So you've got some bench strength. Basic structures, the Emergency Operations Center, or EOC. This is where the corporate office will meet. There'll be various members of management on the team. There should be somebody chairing it. There might be operations, legal, human resources, communications, finance, safety. That should all be reflective of the management structure at the corporate office. The EOC at the site should also have the same parallel structure. Also, in both site and corporate office, you need what I call public information officers, or PIOs. At the corporate office, you may have the vice president of public affairs who's going to be busy with strategy, but he or she needs people to actually provide information to the public. Same thing at the site. They all don't have to be communications people, quite frankly. They can be people who are trained at the site, who have the skills, who can do the job. Also, both locations need a media center. When the media show up, you need to have a place to put them so that you're able to have them all in one place, keep them safe. They get the briefings at the same time from the same person, no favorites with the media showing up, and making sure they get a regular flow of information. But you've got to be the location's got to be identified on site. You also need a family center too, so that the families have a place to go where they can be cared for, given information quickly, given information first. They've got to be together and they've got to be separate, as far away as possible from the EOC and the media center. With the EOC at the site and the corporate office, you need support teams. In other words, human resources, the manager of human resources needs a support team to field calls from family members. Finance needs a support team. Legal needs a support team as well. 1, 2, or 3 people to actually get the work done, while the managers in the EOC can develop the strategy and help solve managerial, in some cases, operational problems. Media briefings are crucial. My rule of thumb with my clients is 20 minutes after the first media representatives arrive, you're doing your first media briefing. and that means your spokesperson has to be prepared. Also, there should be what I call an observer there to take notes. What drives me crazy in briefings, and it's been driving me crazy for probably 10 years, is the entertainment consultants have gotten into it. When was the last time you saw a spokesperson standing alone up front as the sole source of attention? What have you got? In Canada, we call the people standing behind them potted plants, mannequins, or human props. Who are these people? They're not doing anything. In some cases, somebody's picking their nose. It violates the primary rule of theater. The spokesperson's being upstaged, so people aren't listening to them. I will not allow my clients to have mannequins and human plants standing behind a spokesperson. It's amateur. News releases, of course, relatively standard and a very basic way of getting information out. My rule of thumb with my clients, and actually it works, is within 1 hour of the EOC convening or 1 hour of the incident, a news release of 1 or 2 paragraphs goes out. It's filling the vacuum. I had one client in the U.S. who had a leak of very nasty chemicals. It took the legal department 24 hours to approve a 6-paragraph news release. The CEO was on the ceiling. That problem was solved 24 hours later when the head of legal was dismissed. Looked good on him, too. Also, again, as mentioned earlier, the terms and the language in the plans need to be compatible and the same. I'm not so much talking about the different language like Spanish, English, or German. It's the technical terms or the simple, plain English language terms for operational issues, materials that are handled, titles. So that the language and terms, one of my clients, actually many of them, have a glossary of terms within their crisis communications plan, so that if we have somebody who's new on site who's suddenly in the chair, they're now able to go to the glossary at least and understand some of the language that's being used. And the structure should be similar throughout the organization's international sites, regardless of country, but each site must be customized as well to meet local needs. Call-down trees are pretty standard. There should also be a call-down tree for communications. In other words, if something happens, who's going to start the notification process? Here's where you also need the name, the job title, the cell phone number, the email number, all the points of contact, and plus first alternate and second alternate. Forms are also important because in the course of a crisis, you're going to be asked when it's over, what did you know and when did you know it? Record keeping is very, very important. Media logs to record media calls coming in so you can actually call media back. Now you know who is calling, what they're interested in, and it's the PIOs who actually field those calls. They're the ears of the organization to the outside world. Flowcharts can, of course, be helpful to explain some of the operational issues at the site and corporate. So support documentation, you don't need a lot, but you also need some documentation that you can refer to when something's underway. A division of responsibilities is crucial. Who's doing what? It's not enough for one person to know their job. They have to know where they fit into the mosaic. Who's doing what? More information is better than less. Silos don't work. So when something happens, everybody has to know their job. The response people are really good, as I've mentioned. They know what they're doing. They're highly motivated. They're highly trained and skilled. The crisis usually is in good hands. Again, if there's a strong safety culture, that's usually not an issue. If there's no strong safety culture, you're going to be having people on the scene and at the site doing jobs they weren't trained for. Their maintenance budgets have been cut. The people doing jobs they have no business doing. That's an operational problem, not communications. It becomes a communications problem in a heartbeat. And then back to the safety culture. It must be built in and mean it, too. Some of my chemical clients, anybody on site from the first person on the job to somebody who's been there 30 years, if they see and think there's a safety issue, they can literally stop operations. And that will happen. In some cases, it's just a slogan that's not meant. Coordination is also important between corporate office and the site. We've got to be talking to each other operationally, but also talking to each other communication-wise, so they don't contradict each other. Topics that belong to corporate, it's legal, it's insurance, it's the big topics, impact on business, impact on other sites. It's a division of responsibilities. The site manager is crucial. One of the problems with the site manager, and I see this a lot, is when it comes to dividing responsibilities, the site manager is doing the news releases, fielding the family calls, talking to corporate, dealing with government officials, dealing with the operations. Everything's on the site manager just because it looks good from an engineering point of view. Idiotic, absolutely idiotic. It's got to be split out. Policies and procedures as well need to be very clear in all the manuals. Local impact is everything. If the incident is in Australia, then the local impact is so important. It's all about the local impact. What does it mean? How serious is it? How many dead? How many injured? Will the injured survive? Are they life-threatening? Are the injuries permanent? What about people downwind in a leak? What about my water? It's all about local, and that's where the corporate office has got to change their mindset. The response activities is, again, communications. You got to build all your communications based on what responses are required at a certain time to face a certain crisis. Again, you have no time. Also, what is going to be the impact of that response? What problem is it supposed to solve, and how long will it take? There are also business issues too, but if you've got several fatalities, the business issues should not be discussed. A rule of thumb is if you've got a fatality, that's all you talk about for the first 24 hours. You start talking about money and losses, it looks like the money's more important than the fatalities. Regulatory is also crucial because now their reputations are potentially at stake. You've got to bring them into the tent. Generally, the relationships with headquarters will tend to be reasonably positive, but on the sites that is also true as well. Because in some cases the regulatory structure is politicized, and now if you have something happen at a site, that could present political problems for the politicians as well as the regulators. Insurance may also come into play, but again, based on the severity of the crisis, are you insured? It's money. That comes later. There's a time and place for it, but that also belongs not to the site, it belongs to the corporate office. Legal, of course, belongs to the corporate office, so any questions coming into the site needs to be referred to the legal department in the corporate office. It's division of responsibility. The local leads, the days of call New York and call London and call Tokyo and call Paris are over. They've been over for 30 years, and they're even more over with the advent of social media. It's all local, and there's still companies around that help their sites, you know, call New Orleans. I don't think so. Cotton Ally, your dog food. The Texas Ice Cream Company's dog food for a while. That brand is in serious trouble, and it's unfortunate because it's a more than 100-year-old company, and then they decided not to tell the truth and withhold it. Silence can be deceiving, and in some cases, unethical conduct. Monitoring social media is very important. You're essentially monitoring the public conversation. Join the conversation. That's what it is. It's the public talking to each other, but it can be hijacked by special interest groups like unions or Greenpeace. People don't identify themselves, so you're going to have, just like anything else, Twitter and Facebook is essentially the grapevine on steroids. Some of it's well-informed. Some of it's ill-informed, some of it's deliberately used as an agenda for somebody else, but pay attention to it, because the media pay attention to it, the way they always have since modern journalism happened in 1700. Is also important. What are they saying? Because they're going to be talking not just to us, but they'll be talking to eyewitnesses, regulators, neighbors, politicians, the disgruntled employee. And there's always a disgruntled employee around. It's amazing how they get together so that you can correct errors and fill the vacuum quickly with accurate information. Making sure your search engine optimization is up to date. Again, the tools for communication are highly sophisticated, getting fast, and it's getting faster all the time, and that's not news. It's just simply a matter of a lot of us are doing this for the first time, and we're learning every time out. When I started in news, it was manual typewriters. That's how far back I go, and the changes have been actually very, very exciting. Updating FAQs is important too. That'll take some of the heat off answering some basic questions so that your PIOs and your spokespersons can start dealing with current issues. You also need public relations for the corporate communications. In other words, PR and communications for the corporate reputation. Another component that gets forgotten is when something happens at a site, all the other sites are watching too. And that means they're going to start getting calls from their media, their local politicians. WorldCom held a meeting in Seoul, South Korea when the West Texas fertilizer plant blew up, and I was getting calls from my clients who operate similar operations, and they were getting calls from their local community saying, could this happen here? All pretty normal, but you've got to keep all those sites informed and have them monitor local media as well. Another part is of the manual should be emergency contacts, and this also includes on-site contractors. Along with the families, the contractors will tend to be forgotten as well. In some cases, you may have a contractor on site for a day or a week, and if something happens with, say, a welder or a millwright who works for another company, if that person is involved in a crisis, you're going to have to coordinate with that company. In many cases, I've got clients around the world where the contractors are embedded. They've been there working for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Practically speaking, they operate like employees, but they're not. So you're going to have to coordinate with the contracting companies, and that tends to get forgotten. Again, back to coordination. You've got to be trading information, keeping everybody informed, and that means being first and fast. Volume's not your problem in the first 2 hours. You get through the first 2 hours, you're going to do okay. But if you've got time zone issues, which comes into play normally in crisis communications internationally, you got to take that into account too. Back to get big fast, and that means everybody getting big fast. Because you're not going to be able to anticipate all problems. That's the little stuff that gets you, not the big stuff. You need to know also where the hospitals are, where the assembly points are, where your crisis communications is going to be. For example, if you're going to be moved off-site, media center, you need an off-site if you happen to have the whole site declared a hot zone. The alternate locations are very important. It could be simply a matter of a local community hall, a fire hall, a restaurant, a banquet hall. Same thing for the family center. Alternate sites get forgotten because if you happen to have a big one and you've got an exclusion zone, these folks have got to go somewhere. And if the whole site's been declared hot, they've got to go somewhere, and you just pick up and go. I had a client run into that in Trinidad, and they did a fabulous job. And it was 1 week after I was there doing training. Now, the site crisis managements, these are some of the representations that should be on it. They should also be customized to the nature of the organization. With backup as well. Too many operations where you've got all management in a room, but they don't have support teams to get things done, especially in protracted and very complex crises. The government regulatory I've already spoken about, but IT tends to get forgotten too, especially at the site. Especially at the site. The technology is wonderful when it works. And having somebody on IT, on that management team, can make sure the computers work, deal with the complex technical issues that can come up. Also, historians. I'm a fan of what I call double system. In other words, as information comes into the EOC, we'll have a laptop historian recording the information on a laptop. Then it can be emailed to traveling executives. Also, I have a flip chart historian who records the same information by hand on flip chart pages. Then as each page is filled, it's torn off and attached to the wall of the EOC, because if you have a computer problem, you've got an issue. Also, a computer screen can only show one page, where if you have somebody from the EOC leave and then come back 10 minutes later, they don't have to bug people in the EOC. What's happened since I left? They just have to go to the chronology on the wall. Also, anybody can come in and then see the whole chronology all in one spot. Computers are great for distributing information, but for displaying it, it's clumsy. Also, if the technology fails, you've got a problem. We've already spoken about support teams and alternates, but also with the EOC, you're going to need the tools and the equipment. Greyhound Lines is one of my clients out of Dallas, and they have a 24-hour-a-day crisis operations room, or EOC, and they've got everything: computers, fax machines, phones, the works. So all the management team has to do is to walk in, sit down, and start up. Some large energy companies have the same thing, but it's really a matter of making sure that when you've got the people there, they're going to need the tools to do the job. Practice is crucial. Too many crisis plans are doorstops. Yeah, we've got a crisis plan. It's on the shelf. It's dated 1972, and the people listed in it have died of natural causes. The plans have got to be updated. They also tend to be forgotten. One person needs to be designated to update it every 3 months, because the changes are going to be primarily in people and names and phone numbers and duties. It does get forgotten. Also, before you have a crisis, whoever is going to do the spokesperson work, primary, first alternate, second alternate, both in headquarters and site, must have crisis media training. The media scare people to death because people have no idea what they're doing, and they get the question, how many babies have you killed today? Well, what time is it? Then we get the performance of the donkey we saw at the top of the show. I mean, drinking water when hundreds of thousands of his customers don't have it. I mean, it's guys like that that keep people like me in business. You got to take the fear away and show them how this stuff really works. Another component as well, and this is particularly true for the sites, we give a half day of what I call media awareness training. In other words, when something happens, the media shows up. Any living, breathing, walking human being is a potential source of information. Nothing wrong with that. So the media will start approaching employees who've got a lot of credibility in the media's eyes. But they need to know, do you answer no questions? You're not stonewalling. They need to know why the reporter's asking questions and why they're not to answer questions. Say, I am the wrong person for you to talk to. You should be talking to. In other words, it's the people not knowing is what causes the problems. In other words, if you've got an assembly point where the media starts shopping around in the group, find somebody to talk to them, if you've got somebody who's been injured or killed, you're going to have a lot of emotions there. So then you're going to get hands in the face of the camera crew is being assaulted. It can be very ugly. They need to know what's expected of them. And management, especially at sites, don't tell the staff what's expected of them. And so if something goes wrong, it's not their fault. That is a management problem, and that happens a lot. Crisis drills are also crucial. Companies run operational drills, but not many run crisis communications drills. In other words, you can have a plan, but you don't know if it works unless you try it out. I'm a big fan of drills. My philosophy is when you're going to run a drill, it's practice. It's not a test. I always hear my clients say, we're going to test a system. It's not a test. Test means pass or fail. This is practice. I work with professional athletes. They practice every day. They know how to play the game, but they got to get the game plan in their head and make it work. It's practice. Paramedics practice, police practice, firefighters practice, same thing on site, so everybody knows what to do. Then the training cuts in, and what I always find amazing, and I shouldn't after so many years, is that when they've been rehearsed and practiced, they've identified the problems, they know what works, they know what needs to be improved. When something really happens, there's a calmness that takes over. Voices drop 1 or 2 octaves. The pace, instead of speaking at 120 words a minute, it drops to 85 because of this confidence of knowing what they're doing. Also, it's got to be fun. You've got to make these drills fun. I had a client in Florida who had a real prehistoric manager who it was the president of the company. That's right. This guy was an idiot. About 6 months before I started to work with them, they ran a drill at one of their Florida operations, and a whole bunch of things went wrong, which is what you want. You want stuff to go wrong so you can correct it. A whole bunch of things went wrong, and the president of the company fired the plant manager, fired them. 6 months later, I came in, and it took me 2 years to get that site to stop being afraid. They were afraid to make mistakes. It was awful. Fortunately, 2 years after I started to work with this firm, this donkey was sent packing. It was 2 years too late. But it's got to be fun. People don't learn if they're under pressure and fear of failure. They also learn how to cooperate with everybody so that the suits aren't taking over. The site can work confidently in cooperation with the suits and the suits with the site. Weaknesses, you want to find the weaknesses in a plan. I do a lot of drills, and if the drill goes perfectly, it's my failure. Nothing was learned. Nothing was learned. It's got to be, it may be simply the equipment didn't work, or we didn't have the right people there, or the alternates didn't have enough training, or, ooh, this flow of communications isn't working properly. You really want to look for weaknesses. Find out what's working, great, leave it alone. Find out what needs to be tweaked to be made better, then tweak it. And then find the things where that totally collapsed on you, and then you could move to correct it and try it again next time. In summary, again, it's teamwork. The site leads. It's got to be mutual respect with everybody. You've got to have some fun, but be aware, particularly in the international sites, you should be practicing. Again, you're practicing in somebody else's house, so that everybody knows their position, knows their job. It's got to be fun, and it can be fun. One of my clients, anybody involved in crisis communications drills, are seen as the elite, the absolute elite, and to be invited to be a part of it is seen as a huge compliment, and also seen as a professional development and career development tool. The positioning of the function is really crucial. It's called leadership. And then finally, get big fast.
Thanks a lot, Tom. That's the run through of our some of our recommendations on how to approach multi-site crisis. As we said partway through, we're ready to take some questions now. You'll also see, if you look at the bottom left of your screen, that there's the opportunity to download an infographic which covers some do's and don'ts, which you may find helpful. So, just looking at the questions that we've received thus far. We've had one question in. Do you recommend continuous crisis training for senior managers, presidents as part of their personal development, including role play and media prep as a form of brand and reputation resilience, in case they find themselves in front of the media? Tom, what's your view? Is it part of continuous personal development?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. For those, when I start working with a company where they haven't had that, I give them what I call my introductory. Then anywhere from 18 months to 2 years after, there should be some drills as well. We'll do refresher training. Also, and this goes on over a period of years, and each time the training gets tougher, it becomes more challenging. In other words, I expect them to know things. You may have a manager become a VP who's had some training but then is now working at a different level. So this ongoing training gives them confidence. It also shows them how this stuff really works, not how they think it works, like this donkey in the US. some people thought, I'm sure, thought, hey, he really showed them. I don't think so. So the ongoing training is a matter of personal development, because the more senior you become, the verbal skills, the communication skills become more crucially important in the role. Not a lot of paper on the president's desk, minister's desk. Not a lot of paper on the chancellor's desk.
The thing I'd add to that is that when people sometimes think about training for this kind of activity, they think about preparation for the media, preparation for dealing with other stakeholder groups. I would add into it, for senior leaders, the ability to recognize how to adapt their style to the needs of the different people that they're talking to. If they default to their natural style, there's every chance that that will only work for some of the people they're communicating with, leaving the others feeling everything from confused to hostile. Second one we've got is, could you comment on the Concordia ship and the German wings disasters? Were the crises well dealt with from a communications perspective, in your view?
Well, the Costa Concordia was it was a disaster across the board. The company that actually owned it in the States said nothing. They ran and hid, and then the media smoked them out. The company, the operating company, which was in Europe, also did the same thing. I thought the Italian Coast Guard did a fine job. It was a classic case of operations. Imagine doing a safety drill on a cruise ship hours after you left port. Are you out of your mind? I mean, come on. I've been on a couple of cruises where the captain, before they even pushed away, said, in the event of a drama, and everybody knew what to do. So it was awful from start to finish. But it was an operational problem to start with. The captain's one of the first ones off the ship. I mean, hello? So this is a combination of sloppy operations plus, hopeless communications. The German wings crash, it was awful. I'm sure, like many people, I travel a lot, 150,000 miles a year on average. So anything like that I take personally, because it could be me or somebody I know. I thought the company did a pretty good job, actually, and moving quickly, being transparent, because I was watching it like a hawk. So my view is that I thought they identified the problems. They realized, I think in the early going, the issue was the co-pilot. They didn't withhold it. As soon as they had some suspicion and some belief that that might be the case, they started to raise it. So overall, I thought it was quite effective. Also, they handled the families very well, too.
Next question is, do you think presidents and CEOs should be discouraged from having personal social media accounts, as when criticized it's easy for them to respond without a controlled response?
Having their own accounts, I think, is a good idea. It's just that there's, I just don't understand how some people are still saying the stupidest things and getting caught. I mean, hello, have personal account, yes. But before they put anything on the personal account, it should be vetted or with the assistance of communications. It's the off-the-top-of-the-head casual conversational remark that can get people into trouble. They forget they're talking to the world. They're not talking to Joe Bloggs next door. So they need some real serious coaching, and there's been endless examples of managers and executives and athletes in particular getting really stupid on social media. You think after 150 examples people would start to learn, but they don't. I think it's a good and effective tool, but it's just that, another tool which must be worked properly in honest ways, but also be careful not to do something odd context.
We've got a couple more questions. Next one is, do you think there is potential for further reputational damage during a crisis if there is a spokesperson, spokescompany, talking on behalf of the corporation rather than having a representative from the corporate office?
Yeah, back to amateur night at the zoo. I mean, give me a break. I see this in the U.S. a lot. Half our practice is in the U.S. And you see the hired lawyer doing the talking. Zero credibility, absolutely zero. You want to look at the credibility chart in any organization, take the org chart and turn it upside down. The most credible people in any operation in a crisis are the people on the ground doing the work, delivering the service, dealing with the crisis. Under them is management. Under management is the executive. Under the executive is the chief executive, way down on the credibility chart. Under the chief executive is the corporate lawyer. Under the corporate lawyer is possibly the communications VP, the hired flack. Under them are people like me. I'm a hired gun. I and my associates do no interviewing on behalf of clients. We don't have the knowledge, but we don't have the credibility. To do it damages the client's reputation. The very bottom of the credibility chart, the toe jam of the credibility chart, is the hired lawyer. It's got to be somebody with the knowledge and the responsibility for it. Also, when you're looking for spokespeople, don't go with title. In some cases, the last person you want in front of a camera is the president, like this idiot in the States. He had the title, but he didn't have the skill, the knowledge, or the abilities. So if you're looking for spokespeople, look for capabilities, calm under stress, able to make the complex simple, good sense of humor, has a good sense of self. It's the social skills that are important. It doesn't come with a title, but it's got to be somebody in the organization.
Well, thank you. I'm mindful that we've had our allotted hour, so I'd like to thank you all for attending today. The webinar will be available in recorded version, and we do have the infographic for download if you'd find that helpful. We will be running more of these webinars in our series of our experts across the world talking on given topics, so please look out for those. Thanks once again to everyone for attending.